So this portion of the day will be started off by two TED Talks. Our first TED Talk will be by Michael Vu, who is the Registrar of Voters from San Diego County, one of the luckiest registrars in the country, a beautiful jurisdiction. So everybody welcome Michael Vu.
I've got a mic. Yeah, I've got a mic on. Welcome back, everyone. As Christy said, my name is Michael Vu. I'm the Registrar of Voters for the County of San Diego. So by now you've heard, and everyone in this room knows, that data, election data, is important. So what I'd like to do is give you a different perspective of how we may see it, a different perspective. So let me start with this and see if it resonates with you. That's right, the dreaded long line. Besides hearing or reading, voters were being disenfranchised today in the newspaper, on the radio, on television. The sight of a long line can be the death knell for an election official like me. Now let me put that into context for you. When the President of the United States of America forms an election commission in part to look at why there were long lines in this past presidential election and to come up with recommendations on how to fix it, you know you have a problem. For an election official, the mere sight of a long line can make them want to crawl into the fetal position. Now, I may not crawl into the fetal position, but I may, just may, go back to my office and say a prayer or two. Now, when we look at this line, you think of voters being inconvenienced. You think of voting being difficult. You may even say to yourself, where was the planning by the election administrator in this election? But there is a contrasting point of view. Instead of looking at this line of individuals as a negative, imagine that this is a line of individuals that are waiting in line to get into celebrity chefs Gordon Ramsay's restaurant. Or that it's a long, long line because it's a once-in-a-lifetime chance to purchase tickets to a Rolling Stones concert. If you're an election official, if you're an election advocate, if you're an election academic, a candidate, a campaign, we all want to go to this dark place when we see a line. And the reason why we want to go to this dark place is because we equate it to voters being turned off or turned away. But why is it that when we go to and see other types of lines, we have a different perspective? We have an optimistic perspective. Instead of being overly concerned about this line, can we see and maybe consider that there is something thriving or exciting happening? Here's the truth to this picture. It's this guy who's dressed up as Toad. And for those of you who do not know who Toad is, it's this character who's part of the Mario Brothers series. You see, this line is not of individuals waiting in line to cast a ballot. These are individuals waiting in line to attend this year's Comic-Con in San Diego. Now, the question is Comic-Con thriving? Comic-Con is thriving so much so that it's gone international. Where else, maybe besides Halloween, are you going to find 100,000 adults dressed up as Iron Man, Captain America, perhaps even a zombie on the TV show The Walking Dead? Comic-Con is thriving so much so that the genius humans that we are have recognized that there's going to be a long line at Comic-Con and that there's going to be a long line inevitably somewhere, that we have developed an app for people to stand in line for those who are standing in line. That's right. Someplace, sometime, somewhere, if you're standing in line, you can now rent a human being. They call it the Uber of lines. And it was used in this past month's Comic-Con. Now, Comic-Con is a thriving event. That's what I call a thriving event. But let's take this notion of thriving and scale it larger. let's take this notion of thriving and apply it to elections and a thriving community. There are many facets to a thriving community, whether it's the crime rate, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's unemployment, whether it's our infrastructure, whether it's health indicators such as the mortality rate, or it's our election participation. Now, to focus on how well we are participating in elections, we need to step back. We need to step back and determine for ourselves what it means to have a thriving community. So, again, I submit to you that to have a thriving community, we need to know our community. And to know our community, we need to have data. So, how do we build a thriving community? There is a story that may unlock what I'm trying to get across. It's a story that it's a success story that talks about data and the success of using data. I call it the Twinkie Story. Now, in November of 2012, there was something much larger happening, or some would argue, much larger happening than the president getting reelected. In November of 2012, we saw the demise of the Twinkie. That's right. Hostess, the maker of the Twinkie, went out of business. So, it was all over the newspaper, radio, and television. You may have heard about it. One of the things that you may not know, though, is that two individuals shortly thereafter came in and purchased the company. Their names were Andy Jaguar and Dean Metropoulos. These two individuals purchased the business for $410 million with another $250 million intended to be spent to revitalize the company. So, no more than 6 months after the Twinkie went out of business, they were back on the shelves. So what did Jaguar and Metropoulos do to save the Twinkie? Well, they had data. They analyzed the data and saw two significant data points. The very first was that as Hostess was going out of business, they were still a $1 billion company. A $1 billion company. The second thing that they saw was that 36% of that $1 billion was being eaten up as a result of the cost of delivery to 5,000 stores. What was the problem? Well, it was the shelf life of the Twinkie. Now, I could probably see some of your faces here. You thought, well, I thought the Twinkie lasted forever. That's what I thought. It doesn't. It lasts for 25 days. You see, the thing that Jaguar and Metropoulos knew is that they needed to extend the life of the Twinkie. So they re-engineered it to not last 25 days, but now 55 days. 30 more days than what they had done previously. That's right. Now, 30 more days. As a result of changing the number of days that a Twinkie would last, they were able to change the distribution model. A distribution model from a bakery to store to a bakery to warehouse distribution center. And as a result of doing that, they were then able to not only deliver to the 5,000 stores, they were able to deliver to 100,000 stores. If you read the story about these two individuals, you'll find out essentially that the philosophy was wherever you can buy a piece of candy, you should be able to buy a Twinkie. The results were impressive. Not only were they able to reduce the delivery rate from 36%, but they were able to reduce it to 16%. And a $1 billion company to now what is projected to be a $2 billion company. Jaguar and Metropoulos knew their numbers. They not only knew their numbers, but they acted upon it. And as a result, not only is the Twinkie saved, but it's thriving. Now, if we applied this to elections, trying to apply this to elections, if we took the key pieces of information in elections and applied it to such things as this long line, we may be able to reveal the mystery of it. I submit to you that if you are not tracking, compiling, cross-referencing data, you are not leading for the long term. You are riding a wave that's going to hit a shore break. The larger question is, what are we doing with all of this data? For elections administrators, we are in the business of knowing our numbers and to act upon them. Now, the public, they see turnout as the indicator, the key indicator, not knowing that there is a treasure trove of election information at our disposal. Right? One of my main responsibilities when I came to the County of San Diego was to oversee our language services program. Now, our language services program consists of 4 federally covered languages: Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese. As part of that program, we have 4 coordinators for each one of those languages. Their main responsibilities was to go out to the community and talk about the services that we provide, as well as about the election process. One of the things that they would come back, though, when they would visit and meet with our community-based organizations, was that these community-based organizations wanted to have data. They needed to know how well they were participating in the election. The problem was that we couldn't give it to them. And if you know California's registration form, you know that there is a checkbox that you can indicate which ethnic background you belong to, but it's optional. And so that there was no way for us to extrapolate out with any level of precision what the populations were within these 4 targeted communities. But these requests would keep on coming in. They would keep on asking us for this data, and we felt a little helpless because we gave them the same answers. Well, we finally, after a year or more, we came back to the table and asked ourselves, can we provide at least estimated data? Is there another way around this? And the answer was yes. And once we were able to answer that, we were able to compile the information. We took birthplace data, surname data, as well as those individuals that requested their materials in a specific language. We compiled all that information and gave it to these community-based organizations. And as a result of being able to do that, they were ecstatic. For the first time, they were able to baseline themselves of how well they were participating in the county in the election process. Now, that was a benefit for these community-based organizations as well as the targeted communities. For us, it was not only beneficial for us to know that information, but for the first time, we were able to determine how well our program was, how effective that program was. The theme here is that once we were able to get over this mental block of providing the data and how to provide the data, it was easy to compile the information. Now, there's a slide that I like to show. This slide essentially confirms a couple things for us. Number one is that if you look at the vertical aspects of this, you will see that it confirmed for us that the targeted communities participated lower than the general population, registered population. But that's the vertical view. But if you look horizontally, what you will see, and what was telling for us in terms of a storyline, is that these targeted communities, these individuals that were registered and receiving a mail ballot, were participating higher than the general registered population within that community, as you see here, by 10 percentage points. That was key for us because that allowed us to create a message for the targeted communities as well as for ourselves. Now, data doesn't need to be this complex, overwhelming, non-sentient being. It doesn't need to have these over-complex formulas. It doesn't have to be fancy. You don't need to oohs and ahs. But if you know your data and can effectively tell its story, you will be able to plan for not only the short term, but the long term, and improve such things as your election operations, as well as perhaps come up with the next generation of election innovation. Tip O'Neill, former House Speaker, he coined the term, all politics is local. What he was referring to is an elected official needing to know the wants and needs of his or her community in order to be an effective leader. Well, all elections are local. To be effective, to be a leader, you need to know your community, and to know your community, you need to have data. As you look at this line again, I hope you will see the opportunities that we can achieve through compiling of data. Thank you.